Alright, hi guys. This is my presentation on using historical thinking and assessing historical thinking. One of the biggest changes in the study of history that we've had, really since we now have the internet, is history is now becoming less and less about memorizing dates and who did what when, because you know what, even if I need to, I can go look up, okay, Battle of Hastings 1066. And that's not really what is important when it comes to the study of history. The study of history is not just about who did what, when, and so forth. It's about the whys and it's about the hows. And so this resource that we have right here on my screen that I'm going to be talking about is the Stanford History Education Group. They are really, really great. They have a ton of materials and lesson plans. These are mostly for high school, although some of them could probably be pretty easily modified for a middle school level. Overall, these lessons are definitely not going to be good for an elementary level, but the ideas that they have are things that can definitely, you can take when you're talking about history with your elementary level students. So the first thing I'm going to look at, and first of all, I'll just add that you can set up, you see I have my account right here. Getting an account is free, and once you sign up, you have access to all of their materials, but you do need to log in order to have them. Again, free. I like free. Free is good. So the biggest thing is there are criteria when we are thinking about history, and when we are looking at primary source documents. So I'm going to click here. These are the historical reading skills that the Stanford History Education Groups, that this whole thing works to teach students. And again, this is critical thinking. This is stuff that aligns with Common Core. And these are the real skills that will translate not just in history, but can translate to everyday life. I mean, how many times have we seen a friend on Facebook share an article from some kind of Onion-style newspaper saying, "I can't believe this!" And you look at it and you say, well, okay, this is obviously satirical. But people are not reading critically and thinking critically about these news sources. And so this type of thing is what these historical thinking skills teach students, is how to read and think critically. So we have here, the number one thing is sourcing. So the questions that students have to ask, that's this column here, which is great, is who wrote this, what is the author's perspective, which I will add is also going to be important when you get to the AP history courses, because especially with the new exams coming up, the focus, or one of the major criteria that students will be graded on the DBQ is point of view. And really this is, so what is the author's perspective? If, say, for example, we have a DBQ on the civil rights movement, and you have one article from, say, Malcolm X, and one article from a member of the KKK, well, you can obviously say, well, their perspective, they're saying whatever they're saying because of their role in society. When was it written? This is going to be important. I'm going to show in a minute of students get tripped up by some of these documents. Things that are written much, much, much after the fact, they take as reliable sources, when in fact they might not be. So the sourcing is who wrote it, when, is it reliable, why or why not. Contextualization, this is also important. When and where was the document created? What was different then? What was the same? How might the circumstances in which the document was created affect its content? Again, somebody writing about slavery during the slavery period, during, say, early 1800s, versus somebody writing about slavery in the 1920s versus somebody writing about slavery today. That's going to change some of what they might have to say about the institution of slavery. Corroboration. This is, okay, so this document from a white slave owner in Virginia says, I treat my slaves really, really well. They love being slaves. Okay, so we have that. Can we take that as simply fact? No, we need to corroborate it with other documents. Corroborate it with, say, incidents in the life of a slave girl, and we say, okay, no, slavery was actually pretty bad. We cannot corroborate what this white slave owner says. So, again, they need to say, well, you cannot take every primary source document as complete fact. And that is one of the biggest places where I see students get tripped up, is they say, oh, it was written back then. They know 100% what was true about what was going on. And I have to remind students, okay, think about what people have to say about gay marriage today. You have people saying, okay, it's a basic human right. We are denying people these civil rights. You have people saying this is against religion. So you cannot take necessarily what one side says as simple fact. Otherwise, close reading is, how does the author make their point? So again, these are the types of historical thinking charts, and what's kind of cool is, so my department actually purchased these, they have posters of them, so we have those up in our classrooms to talk about these different skills. Now, what I'm going to click to is one of the lesson plans, just to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about, they also have assessments, so questions you can put on tests to talk about, or look at students' ability to make use of these historical thinking, historical reading skills. So what we're going to look at just briefly is the India Partition lesson. Again, that is under their curriculum, under Reading Like a Historian. That's all of these. They have a lot more U.S. history lessons than they do world history lessons, but they are slowly filling in the world history lessons. Over this past year, there have been at least, I think, between 7 and 10 world history lessons added, and I think a bunch of U.S. history lessons added as well, but as I teach world history and I do not teach U.S. history, I have honestly not been paying as much attention as to what is going on in that area right there. So we are here at the India Partition lesson. So I'm going to download the lesson plan here. And what's great is they have this entire lesson plan. So you know the central historical question: was the partition of India a good plan given what people knew at the time? And that's going to be the important thing that students need to think about, is, especially the way I taught it, is they saw what happened in the aftermath of partition. They already were aware of the violence that happened with the migrations between India and Pakistan. And so they could say, well, given what happened, no, it wasn't a good idea. But what this lesson forces them to look at is, why did people make decisions at their point in history? When later we can say, okay, that was a really bad idea. So again, you have your plan of instruction here. I sometimes deviate a little bit from this lesson plan, which of course is entirely your prerogative. So there's a PowerPoint that goes with it. I generally don't use the PowerPoints. They are great for an introduction, but I tend to be a little bit more comprehensive in my content when I'm covering it. But again, they are a good starting off point. And if this is something that you are new to, I would highly recommend making use of them, at the very least looking at them. So lesson plan here. The big thing I'm going to have you guys look at for a second is that this has students look at 2 documents first, answer questions on those, and then they get 2 other documents. And this is where students are forced to corroborate between their 2 sets of documents. And that's one of the things that happens in this site that I really like, is this kind of withholding of information to have students really take their time to go through this process. Otherwise, if I gave them the whole packet, I would have my Speedy Gonzalez students who would not really read through them and just get done with it and not really grasp what I was trying to get them to grasp. So again, this is what's really, really great. And the other thing I really like So it gives you a timeline, so students can refer to this timeline. Almost all of the lessons do have a timeline involved. In this case, especially for the partition lesson, it actually is pretty necessary because a lot of the issues of partition have to do with the fact that Mountbatten really sped up the transfer power, as you see right here on the June 3rd note. So you look here, document A is from Jinnah. It mentions it's a modified document, so students know this is not word for word what he said. It's modified for complexity, for length, so forth. There's nothing that's pertinent that is taken out or concealed from students. It has vocab, as we see here, which again is something I like. Depending on the levels of students, you can modify these documents more, give them more vocab, give them less vocab. But again, it's something I really like. Again, another one from Nehru. You have your other documents, which again, C and D, you are withholding at first. But so what I really, really like is when we get to the questions on the documents, they tell students what skill they are expected to be using. So you can really use these Stanford lessons to map out your entire course. If you are continually teaching students these skills and what the differences are between the skills, then when they are asked to do it and replicate and use those skills on an assessment, they are much more readily able to do it. So again, you have sourcing, who gave the speech, who was his audience. Audience matters. I said on this lesson, so is he giving a speech to Hindus? Is he giving a speech to Muslims? Is he giving a speech to a mixed group? That's going to differ. That is going to change the way in which he voices his opinion and what he says. Close reading, so specifically asking questions about the text. Again, here, sourcing, close reading, contextualization. This is the big piece. Is Jinnah and Nehru are writing before Great Britain granted India independence? And in other words, this idea of are we splitting, are we not, is written before India even has independence. So that is going to affect how these people are talking about partition. So it continues like this. Again, having specific skills, the very last piece of it. So again, we have document C, document D. This is, they have a claim. Students have to make a historical claim and they have to back it up with what is in these documents. So the first one, again, is based on documents A and B. And their claim is, was India's partition plan a good decision given what people knew at the time? And again, that is the important part of this question. Continues with Mountbatten and Wolpert. Again, we have the first two are people from India. The second two are British officials. And so that, again, also is part of the contextualization and the sourcing that's going to be important. So these are the types of historical skills that students need to have. Again, it's teaching critical thinking, critical reading, which are going to be important not just in their history classes, it will be important in ELA classes, it will be important in their life. So I really, really like what they have here. And what I like even better about the Stanford History Education Group stuff is that they have assessments that back up some of these lessons. Now, again, my one critique is they don't have a ton of world history assessments yet, but what they do have is they have really great background ideas so that you can make your own assessments to test these historical thinking skills. So this is one of my coworkers' favorite assessments. This is in their Beyond the Bubble section, which if we go here, I'm going back to the beginning, that's under assessment. So if you click on that, that takes you to Beyond the Bubble. And then you go to check out the website and assessments right there, sorry. And you have a bunch of different ones. Each of these is sorted into the types of skills. So this one is looking at sourcing and corroboration, etc. So the one I'm going to look at, just to show you guys what's here, is the signing of the Mayflower Compact. So it has here your content, the skills, similar ones, etc. So the directions is you're using the image below to answer the questions. It gives you the source. And the big thing that students are expected to pick up on is this source was created in 1859, depicting the signing of the Mayflower Compact in 1620. So that's 239 years after the fact. Now the question that students are asked is, this engraving here, it's a useful resource for historians who wish to understand the signing of the Mayflower Compact. Do you agree or disagree and support your answer? Now the key thing the students have to get is this was written more than 200 years, or sorry, drawn more than 200 years after the fact. So is it really all that useful to understand what happened? Not really. So that's kind of the big thing that they have to get. What I like, again, is they have rubrics. So all that work that goes into making a rubric, which we all do, especially it's so tough when grading writing, this is already done for you. So you have your proficient, your emergent, basic, so forth. Proficient basically just says that the time gap limits the reliability. So it was written 200 years after, it's not that reliable. Other responses is consideration of representativeness. Again, this is in the emergent category. It's basically saying they talk about it, but the big thing they're missing, the main point of this document, which is it was drawn much too further after the point for it to be useful as an assessment. So, again, this is a really great approach, and this has really impacted how I do my own assessments. My tests as a history teacher have now moved to be entirely written. We do cartoon analyses, as a lot is, I say this was a cartoon drawn at the time. What does this show about what the author says? How can this tell us? How do you know? And that's the biggest thing, is not asking students just, what does this say? But ask them, how do you know? So, for example, let me see. I am pulling up, this is my final exam. So this is on a cartoon looking at apartheid. And the question was, what system is this South African cartoon portraying? How does the cartoonist view this? And explain with reference to at least two features of the cartoon. And what students are expected to get is, okay, one, this is talking about apartheid. And you can say, okay, well, the author, the artist, is not in favor of this because they're showing the hypocrisy of it, of this black African nanny taking care of a white baby, and the white baby gets to be in the park, and the black nanny does not, because, again, she is black. So they need to pick up, okay, so there are children who have more rights than an adult woman, this clear delineation, so forth. And I gave points basically, check, they got the 2. So, again, these are the types of questions that we need to be asking as history teachers. And as really teachers of thinking and critical reading. Because, again, this ability to critically digest information is so important in our world. When we have, ridiculous propaganda on the news, students need the ability to not take everything they are told at face value. And I try to teach that in my classroom as, and also, I make sure they feel they can question me in healthy, respectful ways. But I think teaching students to question authority, whether it be the authority figure standing at the front of the room, whether it be the authority figure in politics, whether it be the authority figure who is writing in the newspapers or writing their history textbook. They need to read and think critically, and I really think that a lot of the assessments and the style of teaching that the Stanford History Education Group uses, I think these are incredibly valuable skills. Now again, there's a lot that this site is still lacking with regard to some of the world history stuff, and that's just my own personal beef because I am a world history teacher. Their U.S. history stuff is great, and they are continually rolling out new things. So I would say probably by the end of next school year, I will have less to complain about. But again, this is great. Really, really think about looking into their stuff. Even if you are not a history teacher, I would say this is great stuff to kind of poke through and think about how you might use it in your own teaching, whether that be in an ELA class, a science class, anything of the sort. So again, I will be setting up my Google Hangouts for a couple weeks from now, and I will talk more about how I have made this work in my classroom, and I will answer any questions you guys have about the teaching of historical thinking. So again, thanks for watching. Let me know if you have questions. Strange New Classrooms out.